Hello everyone and welcome to CiC's monthly webinar for February 2023. And today we're having a close look at the hybrid working and how it affects our mental health. We've already got the conversation started in the chat. We're talking about what's going on in our individual organizations or teams, what's happening to us with this, who's in control. Are we doing things and working in the way that we'd like to, or are we doing things and working in the way that we wouldn't really like to? For those of you that I haven't met before, my name is Harry. I'm the head of global specialist services at CiC. I'm a clinician, I'm a psychotherapist myself, and I work largely with organizations to think about the ways in which we're working and how they affect our psychological well-being. Someone said here privately in the chat, my office is 1,000 miles away from the place where my family and I live. And that's such a common thread going on at the moment, is people feeling quite literally thousands of miles away from their office space. But some of us might be literally within a few miles of it, but we're not using it that often, or we don't know how to use it. We're not sure what the kind of lay of the land is. So today I'd like to take us through that. And if you were here last month, you'd have seen we did a kind of looking ahead to the trends of mental health in the next year or so. And this was one of the top ones that came up. Lots of people in the chat were talking about how they're uncertain, how they don't know where their power and control is in this. Got Simon here in the chat working for Babcock PEQF, working from home permanently as students are all over London. Working from home, I find challenge to my mental health, but as long as I escape my desk often, I'm fine. Yeah, we're going to talk about that bit, Simon, escaping your desk. Amanda says, I would like to understand more how hybrid working impacts team or individuals' mental health in regards to equity. Yeah, really good question. And I don't know. I don't know that it's down to whether you're at home or in the workplace. I think it's more down to how it's communicated, what power and control you have, and what feels allowed within the organization. So an organization might have a rule that says you can work from home permanently, you don't have to come into the office, but how is that translated? How is that talked about by your leaders and your managers and your colleagues? Does it feel that even though I'm working within what's allowed and what's the policy, I'm being seen differently or treated differently because I work remotely? So yeah, that's a really good one. Someone said here privately, some of us may be making notes, but do you know if we're able to get any slides you use after the session? I've just popped a link in the chat there to the person who asked that question privately to our YouTube channel. That's where all of these recordings will be. And hello to those of you already there on YouTube. Someone said here privately, I'm concerned the government changing the working from home allowance, not being able to claim it anymore, even though I've been working from home since 2018. Yeah, there might be some kind of broader legislative and government changes that affect how we work remotely. Then we've got Tim in the chat here working in IT for Babcock, at home 90% of the time, and also a mental health first aider. I'd be interested to hear, Tim, how working as a mental health first aider remotely is going for you. Do you find people still kind of reaching out for conversations around their mental health? So I've put in here kind of returning to the office and hybrid working pressures. And I want to hear in the chat, how is your organization handling this? How are they communicating to you about the return to the office or the new model of hybrid working or going to remote only, or for some of them going to being back in the office 100% of the time? Let me know in the chat, how's it being handled? How's it being communicated? Is it bringing up any issues for you? As I said in the introduction, the headline on this is change and uncertainty. And if you've been to my presentations before, you know this is a place that we've talked around before. Change and uncertainty is difficult for human beings. It's difficult for us on a really deep animal level, especially when it comes to our home and our, unfortunately, second home, which for many of us is our workplace. We need to feel safe, comfortable, in control of our comfort and safety to be able to have a kind of clear mind and a clear body when going into work. If I'm feeling any of that stress, that uncertainty in my mind or in my body, it's going to play out in the way that I work. So Amanda's saying here in chat, our model is hybrid. If working, I don't know what a lot of acronyms and initialisms mean, but if WTE, then 0.6, okay, So if it's full time, then you'd be doing 60% of the time in the office and 40% remote. So 60-40 split. Thank you, Amanda. Karen's saying the same here. New policy introduced last year, maximum 40% remote if possible. However, we're in the education sector, so the extent to which you can work remotely is very much determined by whether your role is student facing. Good point. So here we start to see, back to that question that came in the chat earlier about equity and equality around this. Well, my role and the role that I'm contracted to do for the organization might need me to do stuff in person, even though it didn't need me to do it in person during the pandemic because it wasn't allowed and we found other ways of doing it. The organization might be saying, well, it's time for us to be doing this back in face to face again, which can be really tough. Someone says here, hi, I work in HR and work part-time in the office and part-time at home, which works really well. I lead a team of HR advisors and we have a fun hour every month. We play games, which is therapeutic. That sounds really good. You can be on site more, however, we do not encourage people to work from home more. There is need for staff on site. Yeah, okay. So lots of people talking about this same thing of not really feeling like you have complete control over it. And look, my second bullet point here, varied responses aren't easy to mediate in teams and organizations. I might be in a team with people who are not expected to be in the office, and I might be the only one from my team that needs to be in the office for my role. That's going to feel really unequal. That's going to feel really tough sometimes, I'm sure. Cheryl puts here in the chat, we are lucky because we've had open conversations about what would work for each individual. That's kind of my gold standard on this, Cheryl. Yeah. We're each expected to do 2 to 3 of 5 days in the office, and for some teams there is one compulsory day. It certainly works well for me. I found I was more productive working from home, but felt isolated by this and found that simple conversations became overcomplicated by communicating via email instead of just having a quick in-person chat. So the new pattern definitely helps me. Well, that's good to hear, Sharon. It is that balance, right? That balance of the productivity and the positives I find working from home and the collaboration and the communication that I might find positive working in the office. Just because I've put it that way doesn't mean it is the same for you. In fact, it could very well be the opposite. You might prefer collaborating and communicating remotely and find yourself more focused on certain tasks in the office space. This is where it becomes individual, which is, my world as a therapist is the idea of each person needs different things, wants different things, and that might shift throughout our career as well. And that policies have to be set. There has to be some sort of policy now. I don't know that there was. I've tried looking back through my previous employment contracts, and there was only one of them that talked about where I was expected to be for my job, which was in a certain office for certain times of the day. But a lot of these contracts haven't really set this out. So it comes down to organizational policy these days. And as I say, the needs of teams and departments vary, but it brings in that lack of power, lack of control, if I don't feel I have a say over where I'm going to be. Someone said here privately, our team have a fairly strict rota for days in office and days at home to ensure cover. Other colleagues are able to decide for themselves and often don't seem to come in very often, which can be frustrating. Yeah, if you're in the office on a mandatory basis and some other teams are dipping in and out as they like, it can feel really lonely, even when you're in the space that's supposed to be around people. Someone says here, last job became work from home 100% during pandemic and most of 2022, but asked to come back once a month to sit in to meet the team, but all original staff left. So going to sit alone with strangers didn't feel right. Yeah. So we're talking here also about the change in relationships, the loss of some of those close relationships too. Thank you. Thank you all of you so much for giving me so much detail. I really appreciate it. Alicia says here, my organization, our framework is minimum 60% in the office, which is 3 days a week, and then 2 days from home. Increasing days in the office dependent on demands of the service. So again, supporting academic staff and students. In my team, we have agreed one set day of the week when we'll all come into the office. I think that's quite nice, is at least having one point that you can rotate around, one set point in the diary where if you do want to be, or you can be, or you should be in the office, there's going to be other people around. Someone's just said here, our business have just said they are removing flexible working hours in preference of agile working. I'd love to know what the difference is. Flexible and agile seem like synonyms to me. Yeah, I don't know if this is a slight way of changing contracts or changing language, but what's the difference between flexible working hours and agile working? And they go on to say, this has worried lots of people because it hasn't been communicated very well. And as a manager, I am unable to answer my team's questions as the communications were put out without any prior engagement with managers. So right down to my questions at the bottom, how is your organization handling this? Well, they're putting out set rules, maybe, but they're not being very clear about those rules. And if they're not consulting with managers before they put that kind of communication out, they're putting you in a really tough position, because of course all the communication back is going to come to you, and you're in a position of unfortunate ignorance here. That's really not fair. Louise has added here, more pressure is now being put on to attend the office. Someone's helped me. Agile means the contract doesn't have to be changed. Yeah, I was wondering if that might be the case. Yeah, that seems like the agility that's being required there. Thank you. So again, thank you all for sharing these, and let's bear these in mind as we go through some of these other points here. I wanted to share, and I did this research back at in the latter end of last year, about the kind of global trends around hybrid and remote working. And look, it's here to stay. Most high growth companies are using a hybrid working model. The majority of employees researched in this study are in favor of hybrid work. And this is a global survey across 15 industries. 57% of respondents are experiencing disconnect from their organization and co-workers. Now, I'd love to have some data to compare this to. I don't think this is something that was researched very much before the pandemic. I couldn't find anything that really matched up in the size of this study to compare it to. But what we do know here is that there's disconnection, lack of communication, and just that lack of relationship with my co-workers and the organization that's really necessary. Let me know in the chat, by the way, your reactions to these statistics. Do you agree with them? Do you disagree? Do any of them stand out to you as really shocking? Limited networking opportunities, 62% agreed, were negatively impacting their career growth. And this is something that I've investigated with a couple of organizations is, what happens when I can't be around other people doing similar but slightly different work? Is that my skill set can get quite stagnant. My role's really nice and clear, great. If I work from home all the time and that's really clear within the organization, fantastic. But, and we're coming back to that equity question, yes, I might get the same formal learning and development options as all other colleagues, being offered in hybrid models and all of that. But what about the informal learning and development? What about those little chance conversations I might have around the coffee machine, or with a colleague who passes by who does some work that I'm interested in hearing more about? All of that onus, all of that kind of responsibility is put on me as the remote employee to try and start those conversations. Erica's commented on that point, saying here, networking is really important and you learn from others, picking up on knowledge and conversations when in the office, and we're missing out on that. Yeah. Sue says, training to do my job from home was very difficult. I would have preferred a week in the office first. And it's interesting you say that, Sue. We were thinking about this as CiC as an organization. We're in a period of growth and bringing on new starters. And is it preferable for some people to have that training as an in-person few days or week rather than trying to do it online? Different learning styles suit different people and different personalities, but I think it's nice from an equity position to have those options as well. Yeah, thank you, Sue. Tom says here, virtual meetings initially was hard to adjust to, but after a while it became part of normal working. Easier to communicate without chasing people around the building. Yeah. So while the communication might be different and might be difficult for some who are missing out on some of the other social side of it, the practicalities of communicating online are easy. I was in a session earlier. I went in person to an office of an organization we work with, and they had people in the office in the room with me, but also people online from all over the world. That's not something we'd have been able to do without this hybrid working technology. And that's the reminder for me to thank all of our IT and kind of operations personnel that really helped us get through the pandemic, get through a really difficult time. Stella says here in the chat, I think it really depends on the culture, communication style, and openness in the organization, and not for last teammates and team leaders for the disconnect from organization. Yeah, I agree. That is a culture of an organization. Amanda adds, we now all here we go. We now do all training on site, and staff do not start agile working until they're fully competent in the role. Gemma says virtual meetings are often more convenient, but I find in-person meetings so much easier to engage with. Yeah, a lot of people will agree with that, I think. And look, it says here in the chat, 72% agree that virtual meetings improve inclusion and participation. There's a lot of positives around that, around kind of having that opportunity to feel more equal in a meeting, no matter what my status or position within the organization. If I've been invited to a meeting, I should be invited to have my say as well. And perhaps people find that more easy online. But then we have Gemma here in the chat saying, quite understandably, in-person meetings are easy to engage with. Yeah. Amanda says here, definitely notice with my team that those who have been in the office are advancing more quickly than those remote. Mentoring examples are easier in person. Yeah. And I think as a new starter, someone training in a role or trying to upskill myself, it's easier to have those physical relationships with my colleagues. Probably a bad choice of words, those physically close relationships with my colleagues, so that I can ask those questions that might feel a bit obvious and easy without having to disturb someone's day. I can judge based on how their body language is towards me, how their other communication that day has been towards me, as to whether I want to engage with that person. Yeah. Amanda says here, mixed virtual face-to-face are very difficult to chair. This is one issue with some staff on site and some staff virtual. Yeah, it can be hard to make sure that you're offering that equity and engagement. And it says here, the statistic here is about virtual only meetings. I agree with you, Amanda. I think mixed virtual and face-to-face loses the positives of both, and in fact might kind of turn up the volume on some of the negatives of both as well. Cheryl's saying, I still prefer an in-person meeting. I struggle to focus as well virtually. On the flip side, or I like flip sides, on the flip side, virtual has enabled me to access training I'd not have been able to access otherwise because of where they take place. So here we are, positives and negatives for each of us. Someone saying privately, being at a meeting in person helps promote professionalism and better engagement. Easy to switch off when at home with other distractions. Yeah, lots of people agreeing there with Amanda's point as well around the kind of mixed virtual face-to-face ones. Someone saying here, hi Harry, I work for HR. An office was rented at the start of COVID, but it was off hired as we worked well from home. We never moved in. The nearest hub is 45 minutes drive away, but it takes about 90 to get home. I'm guessing traffic. The route is via some of the most dangerous roads in the country, so I'm not keen to feel forced to attend. We have daily team meetings and another catch-up session, which includes others outside of the team, so the social aspect feels fine. I enjoy working from home, but I do miss hugs. Yeah, okay. So there's some real specifics in there as well about what that changes about our routine. We've talked a lot about the structure of the day, but what about the routine of the day? So let me know in the chat. Talking here primarily about remote work, what are the positives and negatives for each of you? I've put a few kind of ideas up here on the screen. Let me know what you think. I think the flexibility of remote working is absolutely second to none. It's not easy to replicate that in the office, that ability to drop in and out of my home life and my personal life. It can be messy. It can make things messy sometimes, but I'm in control. I'm in power of when I'm doing home stuff and work stuff. Someone saying privately, I can do the school run. You know, the change this has made to so many families is phenomenal. Yeah. Terry, I forced myself to take a break, which I wouldn't inside the office. So I wouldn't force myself to take a break in the office. Does that mean, Terry, that you don't take breaks in the office, or that you don't have to force yourself to do them? Do natural breaks occur more easily for you when you're in the office place? Oh, it was the first. I don't take breaks in the office. Okay. So there's less of an allowance, perhaps. And we talk around this productivity guilt quite a lot. Excuse me. This, how do I know I'm working well enough? How do I know I'm working hard enough, especially when I'm, working remotely? Cheryl says, I'm in the same, Terry. I find it easier to get my head down at home as well. Someone says here, no interruptions at home is good for when you're concentrating on work. Louise says, I love my work work-life balance now, as no longer have to travel for an hour each way every day. That's a good chunk of time, 10 hours a week. I can help with childcare and have time with my retired husband, which going into the office doesn't offer. Yeah, and look, going into the office cannot offer anything to do with our home life, right? It can't offer to support us with any of that. Tom says, easier to focus in private working room at home than in open space in office where many people talk at once on the phone. Yeah, I thought that when I was thinking about this session last week, Tom, is that there's a kind of polar opposites. What I have in my workspace at home is almost directly opposite to what I have in the workplace. I have my own space. I have a door I can close at home. I don't know how many of you have that in the office. I feel like that kind of went out the window in the 1990s and early 2000s. I don't know a lot of our customers that have staff with their own offices where you can close the door and have that private space. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got these diametric opposites when we're at home and when we're in the office. It is silent here. All I can, well, I can hear the sound of the fan on my laptop. Like, that's how quiet it is. When I'm in the office, there's loads of noise around, which can be positive for some. Karen saying positives of working from home can be more productive, more time in the day, better work-life balance, all sorts of things. Combats isolation in the office, proximity bias. Yeah, easier to discuss issues on the fly in the office as well. Ellie says, it's been so important to see this change come in. My clients can work as and when they're in the right headspace. Yeah. Love the flexibility in being able to focus, says Gemma, but sometimes home tasks seem overwhelming when I'm meant to be working. Yeah, so you kind of get that creep into thinking about the home life stuff that's difficult while you're trying to focus on work. Sue says, being at home all day with the dogs means I can go out in the evening without guilt. So can do a college course or a bar job to meet people. I concentrate better as I don't have to listen to other people moaning. That's a good one, yeah. I think it depends on personality, says Stella, and approach towards work in office and home office. I prefer working from home. I focus more, not distracted, taking a break when I feel lack of energy. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Lots of people talking about that ability to do the kind of home life stuff, seeing friends, being with the dog, doing the washing and things like that. Yeah. Someone says here, hi, Harry. Remote working allowed me to return to the family home, which was abroad, for a number of weeks owing to a family emergency. I could continue working, which I'd not have been able to do. It wouldn't have been able to do if I wasn't able to work remote. Yeah. Amanda says here, downside longer hours. Yeah, I hear that for a lot of people working from home, the day stretches, and that's it, right? If I've got these two pockets, if I've got workspace and home space, and there's a commute or some time or some separation in between, it's much more easy to keep these things separate. When home and office collide, I get the benefits of both, but I also get that kind of contamination sometimes as well. Manuel said that really well here. Working from home can make you feel like you're living in the office. The work stress continues at home due to being in the same space. Yeah, really good point. Thank you so much for sharing. I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about this change and uncertainty, some of these kind of headline psychological topics we've touched on today. So change is uncomfortable. It conflicts with our fundamental human needs for safety, security, and certainty. That's what I was talking about at the bottom, at the top of this. These kind of deep animal needs that we have. Change fatigue, so being tired from too much change can have an impact. So I'm wondering if some of you are feeling reluctant to change from working from home to going to the office, or change roles, or whatever it might be, reluctant for any change to come because we've just had so much of it recently. And look, I don't expect you all to chime in on this in the chat, but just pay attention. Have a little think for yourself now, what it's like for you working from home, what it's like for you working in the office. What behaviors and emotions do you notice yourself throughout these stages of change? And you can see in this kind of chart here, we tend to go through these different phases of denial, resistance, exploration, and commitment. We deny the change automatically as a kind of fight or flight knee-jerk response. Then, because we've denied it, we set up a resistance to it, thinking I've got good reason not to want this. And then maybe we soften a little and we start exploring the opportunities, and then we commit to how much of this change we're willing to accept. That's usually how it goes. Have a little think about how you've gone through those processes. Natasha says, hybrid working better facilitates working single mothers. It makes the juggling of nursery and school drop-offs with work and options, brings women more easily back into the workforce. Yes, I think so too. Yeah. And there's been a lot on kind of supporting parents in returning from parental leave at the moment. I think that that's a really important part of our career. When we take a break to have a child, we also need to be able to be brought back up to speed. Sometimes people are taking, a fair amount of time off for parental leave. So there might have been things that have changed, and I need to be I had the groundwork done on that so that I can come back more effectively. Hmm. Oh, Victoria's completely agreeing with you there, Natasha. So as an opportunity, it's just an offer. You can ignore this part if you like, but maybe close your eyes if you're listening and watching me, or if you've got me on in the background, but you're also doing some emails or working on Teams or whatever. Just take a break for a second, and I want you to have a little think and reflect on how you're feeling right now about your current working model. If you're one of those people where there isn't an explicit model you're working with, just reflect on this week. Where are you this week? Are you completely at home? Are you completely in the office? Are you sometimes back and forth, a little bit of both? What are the pros of this? What are the cons? And then the second question to think about is, are you getting the support you need? Is there any support that feels missing in that process, missing in that chain? And then as we start to think about the pros and cons for each of us, and we start to think about the support we need and the support we're getting or not getting for this at the moment, focus on what's within your circle of control or influence. This is a really useful technique that I try and implement as much as possible when change comes into my life. Is, okay, what do I not like about this? What doesn't suit me? And then what is it within my power to change about this? What can I influence? Or what can I control? Because there's going to be things that I can control, that I'm in charge of, that I have power over. There's also going to be things that I can influence, but I'm not largely in control of all of it. And there's going to be stuff that I just cannot influence or control, stuff that is completely out of my sphere of power. And then it's also good to recognize what are my default coping strategies. And look, if there's any thoughts or questions or things you want to share that come up from this, let me know in the chat. Someone said here, remote working has allowed me to move to Norfolk. I go into the office 2 days a month, once to each site, advertising on the internet the days on site, so I can see people in person and go through what they need. This was not something I did before, as I just sat in the office. Had I not worked remotely, I would not have survived furlough. I miss the office, but feel I'm adding more value this way. Not good to sit in an office for the sake of sitting in an office. Bosses say they'd like to be us to be in 2 days a week, but sometimes the office would be totally empty, so do not see the point. So look at how well you did there. To think about the parts of this you could control, and then what other parts of your work and the working lives of others that you were able to influence. I think that's absolutely fantastic way of looking at it. Someone says here, we totally support mothers or fathers coming back into work after maternity. We're having an issue where some team members are looking after their young children whilst trying to work. Yeah, naturally so. We're also in a cost of living crisis. If I can find ways to economize and try and do my parenting job at the same time as my other job, I might try that. I might. It might seem really difficult, but if it's the only way of financially getting by at the moment, it becomes a viable option for a lot of people. Martin says here, I work from home 100%. I really enjoy not having to commute and working in a peaceful environment. However, sometimes it's difficult to remain motivated when things out of my control pile up. Good catch there. So well done. You've really gone into that kind of individual check-in. You recognized a bit of a need for you. So now start thinking about, okay, who can I speak to about this? Who can I speak to about this difficulty remaining motivated when things out of my control pile up? Because it's going to happen. That's natural in many workplaces, things piling up out of our control. So who would I go to? Where would I get the support I need for that? Yeah. Amanda says people working while caring for children is something we experience and have concerns with. Yeah. And this would be my biggest recommendation. The best concern to have on this is concerns about what's leading someone to make that decision. What pressures are they under that the solution that comes up for them is one that you're concerned with? Because it is concerning. You can't look after a child and do many jobs at the same time. It's really, really difficult. But if I've got so much pressure on me, maybe financially, maybe time-wise, maybe within my familial relationships, whatever it might be, if I've got so much pressure on me that I'm making that choice, those are the things that we need to solve. Those are the problems going on. Yeah. Simon says, default coping strategy, work from a cafe for an hour. What great idea. Yeah. Someone says here, I work in bids, so wasn't working with my immediate team, but other teams across the country, so spent many nights in hotels. Now I work 100% from home. However, before I'd go to a location, I'd focus on one bid. Now on teams, I end up working multiple bids at the same time, brought a different set of challenges. Good investigation. Well done. Tom says 100% working from home, but option for working in office is possible when needed. Regular Teams meetings online are good practice. If I need more info exchange, I always can contact the line manager directly, easier than in person. Many people will find that the communication with their manager is much easier online. Great. Amanda's added in here, also people working when sick. If they were on site, they would not work, but if at home, they work. I'll disagree with that. I've seen plenty of people working in offices through sicknesses, through mental and physical health issues. It's, human beings will drive ourselves to keep going through some of the most difficult periods of our life. Now, we have a bit more kind of viral concerns, I guess, around people being in the office being sick these days, but I don't think it's anything new. I think whenever there's a credit crunch, a recession, a cost of living crisis, we keep calling this same thing, different things. Whenever there's that financial pressure, people really start looking at where they're using their time for work and feeling under that additional pressure. Yeah. Amanda says here, think people do this due to work pressures and not wanting to hit triggers. Absolutely. Especially if the culture in my organization isn't set up to support people with their mental health. And I hit one of those triggers for time off sick, and then I have to have that conversation that it's due to my mental health, and I don't trust that my organization is going to handle that sensitively or care for me through that, maybe through no fault of the organization. We still have lots of cultures around mental health that we're battling against. But if I can't be explicit about that and be comfortable about it, I'll come into work when I'm not well, because it's the easier option. It's the path of least resistance. Someone says here, I realized I was getting quite burnt out pre-pandemic. Snooze alarm, 1.5 hour commute, work, 1.5 hour commute home, eat, shower, sleep, repeat. Wow. I found a better balance working remotely and I'm making some adjustments to maintain the balance while working some days remotely. On the days I work from home, I try to either start earlier and finish earlier so I have a longer evening, or have a little lie-in. Also, a lunchtime shower and pamper is a luxury you don't have in the office. That's a great one. Yeah. Someone says, apologies, but just remind me, what is the purpose of this meeting? It's just an open discussion around mental health with hybrid and remote working. It's our monthly webinar. It's a good question to ask in meetings, though, Colin. I appreciate that one. We started doing that a bit more at CiC. Make sure that you're in meetings that you can either take or add value from. Wonderful. So we're talking about change. So many of you here are talking about change and uncertainty. And what do we need to be resilient through change? Nothing is my answer to that. Although we don't like change as human beings on an animal level, as I've said, we are very resilient to it. We usually do really well, usually with the support of some other people around us, colleagues, family, friends, maybe professionals. And I'd love to hear in the chat if you have any tips for this that you can share with each other. But aiming for realistic optimism. And I use that phrase to pay homage to and try and counteract some of the catastrophizing that can happen when we're going through change. Change naturally brings on additional anxiety. And the anxiety is what's coming next? What else is going to change? What's going to get worse? What do I need to prepare for? If we can communicate more clearly and aim for a bit more realistic optimism, we're going to be much more likely to deal with the problems as they come rather than creating these catastrophized issues. Derek shared here in the chat, I had time off with depression whilst working from home, and the support from the business and co-workers has been excellent. Much prefer to work in the office, but it's handy to opt to work from home now and again. Look at how wonderfully this can be dealt with. Thank you so much for sharing that, Derek. It's important that we hear the positive experiences of this, because when it's handled well, look what you end up with. You end up with someone who's come through the other side of a difficult period, a period of depression. But I don't know why it is, but it's coming across from the way you work, the way you wrote that you feel really competent and confident and looked after at work, which is precisely what we want after someone's had to take a break for their health, be it physical or mental. Someone says here, sometimes people work from home when they're feeling under weather because you feel like a bit of a leper if you have a sore throat or cold come into the office. Yeah, exactly. I might just have a sore throat because I was at the football all weekend shouting, but I don't want people to assume that I'm ill and try and stay away from me, so I might work from home. Yeah, good point. So what else can we do? Keeping communication channels open. It's so easy to withdraw and shut off when we're in these stages. So we want to try and adopt this growth mindset. What more do I need to bring in rather than what am I trying to push out? Take time out to reflect. We've done a little bit of that today. And if you ever need to go back to these reflections, I'll paste it in the chat again here, but you'll be able to find the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. Go back there, skip through to the reflection slides, go through this again. And that's part of self-caring, proactively and regularly. Not just like when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. We need to do this day by day. And routines. At least if change is going on, can I be a bit more in charge of my routine? Can I finesse my routine? Can I get it down to the minute what I need to be doing and where I need to be for it? That can really help bring that certainty to our lives. And that certainty is always going to help minimize the impacts on our mental health of any change. I also wanted to talk a little bit about what leaders can do. And let me know in the chat, any of you here that are leaders, or any of you that have got particularly positive or negative experiences of leadership around this that we can all learn from. Let me know in the chat. Adam says here in the chat, there are pros and cons to working from home, but I do believe my workplace sees the benefit in allowing our team to work from home for a day a week. More dependent on personal circumstance. It shows a level of trust in your staff that you know they'll be productive, and that in itself is a mental health boost. Yeah, trust, respect, security, safety, they all come under this like good for animals title. Change, uncertainty, inconsistency, lack of clarity are on the other side of it. They're the ones that cause our mental health difficulties at work. Someone says here, we do a well-being check-in before our team meetings. Great idea. Alexis says here in the chat, I joined the company at the beginning of the pandemic, then contracted COVID myself. Sorry to hear that, Alexis. Have spent a considerable amount of time recovering from this with long COVID. And the company has been really supportive, and working from home enabled my slow and long recovery from this. Being able to attend medical appointments and physio, which would have been near on impossible if I was in the office. Another really good point about how working from home can really be engaged. It's really good to hear another positive experience of this being managed well. And look, leaders play a key role in times of change. We can foster an environment of that trust, respect, compassion, all those positive things we're talking about. We need regular communication, particularly when and it's here, this like second to last bullet point. We had a bad example of this earlier. Updates around the future working model. What's coming next? What change are you working towards? And if your senior leaders are not communicating that to you as managers before it goes out to staff, that is putting you in a really tough position. So try and have a conversation with your leaders around that, because it doesn't help. The communication always comes off badly if it jumps managers, because managers know the context for their team. Managers know the culture in their team. Managers know the language that's used all the time in their teams. We must rely on direct line managers to pass news of change to the staff that they're going to be supporting through that change. If I bring the change from up here to down here and then say Harry in the middle is going to help you, and Harry doesn't know how this happened, how we got to this decision, what the ins and outs of the new policy are, I'm not actually going to be able to support my staff at all. Amanda says here, we had task and finish groups to scope and understand needs of staff preferences on hybrid working, regular communications with frequently asked questions, and drop-in huddles for staff to ensure we made informed decisions. That is caring. That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Amanda. Role modeling healthy habits is going on right there. And the more we role model that for our team, the more they'll role model that communication with us when any change is happening for them that they think will affect the workplace too. So I've nicked a couple of my slides from my working from home well-being session that's likewise on the YouTube channel if you want to look at it in more detail. There are a few things we need to do when we're working from home to set up for success. Have a routine, what time you get up, what time you start work. Make sure you're clean and tidy, because if you feel slobby, it starts to affect your mental health. I know, says the guy in the unironed shirt. Have a good breakfast and begin engaging with your colleagues early. We found here at CiC that having team meetings at the earliest opportunity in the day, when all staff that are going to be in that day are in that team, having a check-in with them is just a really good way to start the day and bridge that gap around hybrid in the office remote working. Even if it's just a quick hello on a Teams chat, it doesn't actually have to be a meeting, but something to engage and say, hi, I'm here today. Taking breaks should happen in the office and at home. I know someone said this earlier, that they force themselves to take a lunch break when they're at home. Have a think, why do I give my lunch break up to work when I'm in the office so easily? Or vice versa, why do I skip lunch when I'm working from home? So schedule breaks, at least one every 120 minutes, every 2 hours. Take them. Move away from your workspace, whether you're at the home or in the office. And look, if you can't go outside, just go and stand near a window. I told you I was in an office of a customer of ours earlier. I thought, oh, maybe we can talk about going for a walk outside. And I looked out the window and it was like an industrial zone. And I thought, okay, maybe there's some nicer places to relax in the office than there are outside. Leave your laptop and your phone in your workspace. And then maybe take some time out to do some breathing exercise. Schedule a chat. Coffee meetings, lunch meetings, whether you're in the office or you're working from home, could be really important. And then finally, think about the space you're working with. If you're doing this at home and you might be working in the same room that you then relax in later, have something that you can move around, something that you can cover over your workspace, and speak to your organization about what you need to be productive at home. If you don't have all the equipment you need to be productive at home, don't wait. Go and ask for it. And yeah, working with HR and IT to ensure the kind of technology is seamless so that even when you're at home, you feel part of the workplace. Ellie says, take breaks more often if you are neurodiverse, please. What a lovely reminder. Thank you, Ellie. Sean says, having to get up earlier to travel much further than before, I can listen to music, audiobooks, movies on journey, and come into work more refreshed and ready to support the team from the get-go. Yeah, I like that. Sometimes that commute getting longer isn't always a bad thing. It means I get up at a different time. Sure, I might need to go to bed a little bit sooner. As long as I'm getting good rest, actually that rest can continue on my commute. Especially if I'm watching movies, listening to audiobooks, I'm learning, I'm doing something creative. I'm not jamming myself straight in front of my laptop to start working. That's what happens to me sometimes. I get up and I know I'm working from home today, so my brain is already on work. It's not on me and my needs. I've talked about this on my other presentations, but there's this really good idea of this third space. Considering this loss of commute we have, practice those 3 Rs. Whether you're coming home on the train, in the car, walking on the bus, or whether you're just staying at home and moving to another room, or even just to another side of the couch, take some time to rest, reflect, and reset before moving from your workspace into your home space. And consider everything that you do during your working hours, even if you're at home, is part of that workspace. Even if I go into the kitchen and put a load of washing on to get ahead of myself, I'm still working. I'm still at work, trying to stay in that mentality. And then we don't have too much of that blurring, because it's where the lines become blurred that it's much harder for me to take control. And he says here, agreed, the beauty of a commute space is lost at home. Yeah. Victoria says, go for a walk with a podcast on is helpful for me. Audiobooks for when I have a longer drive. Yeah, lovely. Cassie says, I have a child with additional needs and also returned from maternity during COVID. Without the new flexible working, I doubt I would have been able to return to my role. Both of my managers have been so supportive, and I think my productivity and enthusiasm has really been boosted. I've been seen and valued as an individual, and I'm also upskilling from home too. Perfect. This is why the office is not necessary. So grateful for you, Cassie. Yeah, I'm really grateful for you sharing that. Thank you. So working well remotely is about choosing the right tools, respecting our differences, as well as different time zones and working hours. I hear this one a lot when we're talking about global or international organizations. Trying to find designated opportunities for communication and socializing outside of work meetings, learning and practicing online meeting etiquette. Having some sort of rules around it can be useful. And yeah, that anchor day, some of you have talked about that, having one day that teams are going to be in the office so they can collaborate, working more closely. Just start thinking, what are the little things that go on in your team that help you work well remotely? Can you share that with other departments, other colleagues, people from completely different organizations? There's probably, let's see how many people we've got here today. We've got 130 of you here right now listening. There's probably all the best practice that we need right here in this virtual room. But are we all sharing it with it? I'm losing my words. Are we all sharing it with each other as effectively as we could? So look, the advice from me is going to start with talking. It's not a surprise coming from a therapist. Talk to your leader about your new working model. Discuss how it's working for you. Discuss how it's not working for you if it isn't. Discuss the broader team, the effects it has on your wider work. Get these conversations, all that stuff that's going around in your head about this, get it out in the open. Because if you leave it up here, it's much harder for us to do anything with it. It's much harder for us to help and support you, but it's much harder for you to be helped and supported by the organization too. Cool. I'm going to skip that piece on relaxation because it's probably more relaxing not to go right up until the end of the hour. So just a reminder for those of you about the support available from CiC. You can all get support from our online services, and I'm going to put the URL for that in the chat right now. It's just wellonline.com. You should be able to find all of your login details for that from your HR department or on your intranet. I'm realised right now that I have put the wrong URL in the chat, so please ignore that one. It's wellonline.co.uk, the one with the actual proper link. And look, sign up for our newsletter. CICwellbeing.com is our corporate site. Down at the bottom, you will find all the information you need about all the services we have there. And you'll have the ability to sign up for our monthly newsletter where you'll get information about these webinars. I've put a link again there to our YouTube channel. You'll find this recording up there in the next couple of days. And for those of you watching on the recorded webinar, thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to end the recording now, and I'll hopefully see you at the next one.